Hi, welcome to another episode of Atheists Speak Up. I'm Charlotte Davis. Here's my friend Stu Chisholm. He is the author of Knowing Guns, The Ins and Outs of Firearms and Firearm Politics for the Uninitiated. So, Stu, how did you become interested in guns?
Well, you know, as a small boy, everybody's interested in guns, you know, guns and robots and pretty much animals or things that little boys like. And back in the 60s, it was a lot less taboo to have toy guns and play cowboys and Indians and whatnot. And then as I got older, my mother introduced me to the shooting sports. She bought me my first revolver. I can't remember if it was my 12th or 13th birthday, but she bought a little revolver at a pawn shop before that was illegal, and took me out to the farm and taught me pretty much firearm safety rules that I still use to this day. And in my head, they kind of existed as recreational equipment. They were things that came out, you know, alternately with the badminton set and you know, all the other stuff. And then we put them away and forgot about them. And I would have never have thought of carrying one or taking it to school or any of that stuff. That they didn't live in that compartment in my head when I was that age.
Well, that's a good thing. Okay.
As it should be, right? And I think that was more the norm back then. You know, nobody thought about shooting up their school back in those days. As a matter of fact, there was one time where I took a revolver to school for show and tell, and it got passed around, and the teacher talked about the history of firearms and the Second Amendment, and there were no TV, and there was no one freaking out. Nobody got hurt. It was just a different day and age. In fourth grade, I remember, I talk about this in my book, in fourth grade there was a big assembly where the Hazel Park police came to our school, which was Leo Clark Elementary. Shout out to Ferndale, Hazel Park school system. Leo Clark Elementary, and they had all kinds. They brought all these guns and they put them on the stage. And on one side, there were all these nasty, ratty-looking, beat-up guns. Some of them look homemade, and some of them had tape on the handles and what have you. And on the other side were guns that looked really nice and new. And I said, "What's going on here?" And they said, "Well, on this side, these are the guns we confiscated from criminals or we found on the street. And these are the ones in current use by the police." And I said, "Really?" Because right up in front was a Thompson submachine gun, you know, a Tommy gun. And I said, "Is that a Tommy gun?" They said, "Yes. Would you like to hold it?" And I said, "Sure." So they dropped it into my arms. And if you remember anything about the gangster movies, it's very ergonomic. It's meant to be held kind of like this. And I didn't know the word ergonomic back then. I was only in fourth grade, but that's exactly what it was. It just had this natural feel. And I tell people this story, and I'm like, can you imagine a policeman handing a grade school student a fully automatic firearm now? Different day and age.
Okay, so that was one of the confiscated weapons.
No, that was one.
That was one of the police weapons.
Yes, police used to use those back in the day.
All right, so that was kind of show and tell.
Yeah, so that spurred my interest. But again, they were sporting goods until later in life when I started my own business. By profession, I'm a disc jockey, and I drive a highly marked vehicle late at night. You know, after the party's over, I'm taking my stuff home. So people see that vehicle, they know it's full of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Back in the day, and even now, they think that DJs carry a lot of cash, bands and DJs, what have you. So I started at the advice of my wife after about the third or fourth TV news item about a band or a disc jockey getting ripped off at gunpoint. She said, "You know, I think it's about time you should check into a carry permit and getting a carry firearm." So she wasn't really that great on the idea at first. So when she said, "Yeah, you better do it," I didn't waste any time, and I got my first firearm. This was about the mid-90s, and I took my training course and passed. I was thankful because it wasn't as easy back then, and I've been carrying ever since.
Okay. And you've also got a CPL instructor license now.
I did. I did because I know a lot of other DJs and a lot of entertainers. I work with other venues and what have you, and they all kept saying, Stu, how did you learn all this? Can you teach me and what have you? And I thought, well, yeah, I can, but it won't do you any good unless I get certified. So I decided a couple of years back to take my accumulated knowledge and go to a class and get actually certified to instruct, and so that people can get themselves one of these.
Okay. So you did that prior to writing Knowing Guns?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I've had my carry permit since before they reformed the law here in Michigan. I was kind of a little bit of a part of that. And people thought, oh, we've made it easier to get them. Well, no, the law is pretty much the same. The requirements the same. The training is actually more stringent now. But what used to happen was that the gun boards or the sheriff's office could deny a permit and not have to say why. And they did it routinely. So you would take all your training and you'd pay all the money and you'd submit your application, your fingerprints, and get the FBI vetting you, because they do an extensive background check, a lot bigger than the one that you get when you're just buying a handgun. And they would do all that, and then the sheriff would say, nope, next, denied, next. And there was no appeal. You have to wait a whole other year. You'd have to go through it all over again just to be denied again. And there were people, the instructor who instructed me also instructed Jack Kevorkian, because that man had death threats, and as gleefully as he used to send people off into that dark night, he wanted to stay alive. And he went to my instructor, Jim Binder, a great guy, by the way. And there were other people too, business owners, people who would routinely carry large amounts of cash, jewelers. There was doctors who performed abortions, things like that. And they would just deny them offhand. They didn't have to have a reason. They just, unless you were a big donor or you knew somebody, you were a friend, then you got denied.
Why? Were there only so many licenses they could hand out per year, or how has that changed now?
No.
Everybody, if you pass the test, they tell you.
Yes, it's
if you're
called
denied,
shall
they tell
issue.
you why.
Yes, it's called shall issue, and that means that if you've met all the requirements and you've passed the background check, and the FBI vets you and says, "Hey, this is as close as you're going to get to being a certified good guy," then they have to issue it unless they can find another compelling reason to deny you. And that compelling reason has to be either a felony conviction or some mental health issue.
Okay.
And I'm all for that, because I mean, there's no worse mix than giving felons and dangerously
So why do you think they denied them
ill.
before? Corruption, payoffs?
You know, it was
they wanted to limit the number of licenses out there, or?
I think it was just a good old boys
idea?
network.
Okay.
I think it was. Not all of them did that, by the way. I'm from Macomb County. In Macomb County, we already had shall issue. So we kind of lived the life of Riley before 2001. I got my first permit, I think, in 97 or 8, somewhere in there. So there were no restrictions as to where you could go. Now there's a laundry list of them that was kind of a part of the political compromise to get the bill passed.
Okay. It's called the shall
issue.
What is it? How do you spell that? What is shall
No, it's
issue?
just shall issue. Like, I shall give you your license.
Oh.
If you, it's not an acronym. I know
Shall
we like
issue.
those
Okay,
fancy
I'm not a gun
acronyms and
person. But anyway.
I try not to toss too much jargon around, because that's another reason why I wrote the book, to catch people up on the jargon in case you're watching the news and go, what the heck is a CPL, or something like that.
So anything in particular you'd like to share from the book? What inspired writing a book?
Well, the book came about because as you know, kind of as an atheist, and being that we're a pretty fairly liberal bunch, this is all either new stuff to most of us, or it's they consider it you know, like, ooh, you must be a conservative. It's
Right,
like,
you have a group called Godless Gunnies.
yes,
right?
Godless Gunnies, yes.
And you made up that name?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
It was just the spur of the moment kind
original.
of thing. Yeah, yeah.
Completely original. The one and only.
And that came about because I first got into atheism well, I was an atheist, but I first got into meeting other atheists back in the mid-90s when, you know, with the old 14.4 dial-up modem. And I just dialed up Southeast Michigan atheists, and I found the Great Lakes Humanist Society. Big shout out to my mid-Michigan atheist maniacs. And then through them, I heard about a new meetup that was starting called Detroit Atheists Meetup. And I went to the first one, and my truck was brand new. It was, I think, 96 or 7. And it was me and 2 other guys at a Starbucks in Harper Woods. But over the years, that grew, and we moved to Royal Oak, and we met in different places, and now we're meeting at Logan's out by 14 and out by Oakland Mall, 14 and John R.
Okay.
And
so
you couldn't
did that contribute to the book?
Oh yes, yes. Because what happened was I would come in there and I would start talking about you know, my shooting experiences and what have you, and I couldn't have got a weirder reaction than if I'd have beamed in a la Star Trek. You know, I mean, people would like back up sometimes.
Isn't that kind of a right wing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or the eye roll. The eye roll was
Issue?
sometimes palpable.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So then they'd ask me questions, and I'd answer questions. I found that I was answering the same questions over and over, and the same thing happened at a open house, like a town hall meeting. Sander Levin came to a banquet hall really close to my home, so I couldn't resist going to this town hall meeting, and I went just to see what was happening. I didn't have an agenda. And when I found out, you know, the major buzz at the time was the economy and jobs and what have you, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to sit back and watch. Unfortunately, though, somebody else up front started saying, you know, your record on guns is terrible. How do you justify blah, blah, blah? And I thought, uh-oh, here we go. So the woman sitting next to me, I'm kind of in the middle of the crowd. The woman sitting next to me was listening, and the guy up front said something about being anti-gun. And that's a bit of jargon, because it's like in the political debate, you're either pro-gun or anti-gun or neutral. And the woman next to me said, well, I think I'm anti-gun. And I said, well, do you mean that in the way that you don't think that anyone should have guns, that maybe, you know, like a senior citizen living at home should be defenseless against a home invader? Or do you mean that you're against violence? And she thought about it for a minute, and she said, yeah, I think that's it. I think I'm against violence. I said, I am too. I'm Stu. I'm an NRA member. And everyone had turned around and looked at me. I didn't know they were listening in. And after the meeting adjourned and it was Q&A time, a bunch of people run up to the senator. More people came up to me and started asking me questions. And the biggest one when I'd answer was, why haven't I heard this anywhere else before? I'm like, well, gee, I don't know. So I after about the 1000th time, you tell people, no, the Second Amendment isn't about muskets. You know, no, an assault weapon is not talking about machine guns. Those are already pretty much illegal. I had to write a book. So this way, someone asked me that, I go, here, this will answer everything, get back to me. Because, of course, it's not static. As the debate rages on, new issues come up. But that's basically my motivation for writing the book. I'm sorry, I'm not concise.
Your uninformed friends.
Yeah, and that's really what it is.
Social circles.
Most people just don't understand a lot about the issue, and I will say that not everything is hunky-dory on both sides. You know, there are times when I do part company with the NRA. It might come as a shock, but like I wrote an article for a website called ammoland.com. And my article
was it? Ammo?
It's Ammoland, like ammo, like guns and ammo.
AMMO?
Ammoland.com.
Yes, okay.
I'm sure there'll be a nice graphic right about
somebody wants to look that up.
here. And I wrote an article called we were for it before we were against it. And it's about improving background checks. Because as everybody knows, the NRA used to be for improving the background check system, because now it only covers handguns, and it only it's an instant thing. If you go to a gun store and they're a licensed dealer. They run your background. It's just basically running your driver's license, your ID, making sure you're not on the prohibited list, and then you get to carry out your transaction. Well, as a lot of people like to point out, it leaves what they've been referring to as loopholes. It's not really a loophole. You know, they like to talk about gun shows, but really it's all private sales. So if I were to sell you a gun from, you know, if I had one you wanted to buy, and I sold it to you over my kitchen table, it doesn't cover those. It doesn't cover if I put one out on the internet or, you know, through a classified ad. So I came up with an idea that maybe we could put the instant check system online just like the sex offender registry. And that way, if I had a gun for sale, I'd kind of like to know, if I'm not selling it to a friend, if the person that I'm selling it to is prohibited. I don't want to put a gun in a bad guy's hand, and I think I'm typical of most gun owners. But there's politics. Politics enters the picture. And one of the political problems is that the people who are trying to ban or stop gun sales was they want to force all sales through federal dealers. And that means that a check will get run. That means if you were my friend and I wanted to sell you my gun and I wanted to give it to you for a smoking hot deal, or just give it to you, gift it to you, well, we'd both have to go down to Bob's bait and tackle shop. Now Bob is going to invest some of his time and resources in doing this transaction, and he knows he's not going to sell you anything, so I'm his competition. So what's he going to do? He's going to charge 25, 50, maybe 75 bucks just to do the paperwork. Now suddenly that great deal isn't such a great deal. And it adds a kind of a de facto tax to every private sale. And of course the people who don't like guns say, good, let's make it more expensive and price out a bunch of people. But the trouble is, the people you're pricing out are the people of the most modest means. They live in the poorest neighborhoods. They have the crappiest jobs, and guess what? They're the most preyed upon group. So you're really disarming the people who need it the most. And disarmament, I think, is the wrong way to go. I think the problem is we're putting laws up that only hobble the law-abiding. It's not going to stop your average gang member. Just like our drug laws don't stop the drug cartels and the gangs. Drugs are cheap and plentiful on the street. If you did the same thing with guns, bad guys are still going to get them, and they're probably going to get cheaper and easier for the bad guys to get, because they're going to set up supply lines, because right now they don't have to. So I think...
Well, because you're saying they can buy them legally? They don't have to set up supply lines because they can buy them legally? I thought they're not supposed to...
Well, they can't. They can't really buy them legally, but bad guys break laws. Bad guys break laws, and they're going to do it anyway. No, I don't think we should make it easy for them. Put every roadblock you can in the face of bad guys, but I think what we really need is way more criminal control and less gun control. Because
we can't hardly build more prisons than we already have.
No.
That's kind of self-defeating.
But building a prison is an easy thing to do. Warehousing people isn't working. Recidivism is a joke. Do you know that the average person coming in a prison has been there before? More than half. I forget when we passed that, but I read somewhere more than half of people now going into prison have been there before. And it only breeds for harder criminals, I think. What we have to do is get tougher. We have to be less tolerant of gangs. We have to get less tolerant of that drug house down the block. Have some guts, report them. Don't tolerate them, just don't let them exist. We have to have crime.
I think people are afraid of them because they have guns.
Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
So how do we make licensing? I wanted to get back to how you were talking about like gun shows and they can go in and buy guns. I'm really curious about that. You know, that's what I've heard. And kind of you were talking about this online thing.
Yes.
Does that actually exist, or is that just?
Well, you can't buy guns through the mail.
Something in theory that you wanted to, that you are thinking of.
Oh no, there's all kinds of sites
but
out
I mean,
there.
So
I won't
people
mention
can actually, if you own a gun, you can just sell it to somebody.
Yes, it's a legal product. It's legal for me to own. It's legal for me to buy. It's legal for me to sell.
Right.
In Michigan, if you don't have one of these,
so there are lots of loopholes to any kind of background check. There are tons of loopholes. Somebody can go out and buy a gun for somebody else and sell it to them.
Do you know it's actually, though, a law? because your firearms dealer is licensed, and they can access what they call the NICS system, which is the National Instant Check System. They get access to that. By law, I can't. I can't access that. Now, some people were saying that the reason that law exists was because of privacy concerns. And I thought that was odd, because a dealer, when they run your ID, they get one of three results back. It says denied, approved, or hold. Otherwise, there's no personal information exchanged. Denied means the sale's denied. You're somehow prohibited. And you tell the customer, I'm sorry, I can't sell this to you. Here's a form. You can contact the ATF.
Okay, so he goes and finds somebody walking down the street and says, I'll give you $100 if you go in there and buy that gun for me and sell it to me
And
right
that's a
now.
felony.
And that's a fair...
That's a felony.
How is that a felony?
Because the law says if you lie and buy a gun for somebody else that shouldn't have one, you get 5 years in club fed. It's a felony. It's already against the law. Now, that's also called a straw purchase, and it's
But
not
if
that
you
they
can
don't
just say,
happen.
I didn't know, I just bought the gun, and then I decided a week later I didn't want it, I didn't like it, so I sold it to him. I had no
Right.
idea he had a record.
Yes.
I mean,
it's slippery, yeah. But it's already a felony.
That's
like I
like
said,
a huge
laws,
loophole.
it can be. It can be.
You don't have to be too slippery to squeeze through that one.
Right. But my idea was that anyone having a legitimate, if they legally own their firearm, they should be able to go online. And they could beef it up so where they could accept more phone traffic and accept more computer traffic. And then wherever you are, wherever your smartphone works, if you're at a gun show, if you're out in the backyard, you can run your own instant check, get approval or a hold, and every check could get a confirmation number so you could prove that you ran one. And at least the legal channels would all be closed. The honest people would be barred from them, from sales. So again, you can only close the doors you've got. They find a way to dig a tunnel, you're only going to find out about it later. Because the police departments are getting their budgets slashed so hard, you don't have drug interdiction or gang units like you used to back in the day.
Doesn't really look like a tunnel to me. It looks like a banquet hall. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, it can be.
I mean,
it can be. But as you might have noticed too, that I'm on the side of trying to work with the other side for solutions, because I realize that our Second Amendment rights do come with responsibilities. And if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. So I try to tell people on my side, hey, look, we got to have the conversation. We don't have to capitulate. We don't have to compromise. But we do have to do something. And I think there's these guys, incidents that just make us plain look bad. Why aren't we taking care of our own? Every accident you hear, no, they are at a record low. The incidents that they'd like to show on TV of the kid finding daddy's gun and all that stuff. Well, those have fallen recently to near record lows. But it's a very emotional image. And the other side likes to put commercials out saying, oh, this happens all the time. And so I think we do have to do things to help minimize or eliminate those. For instance, I wrote another Ammo Land article called Your Gun Safe is Probably Crap. You can Google that. And it was about this video I saw where it showed some popular firearm safes, and it showed this 8-year-old getting into one without any tools in about 5 minutes. And I thought, wow, how can that happen? Well, they make them in China. They make them as cheaply as they can. People don't know. They think, hey, I got a great deal on this safe. I can't open it. It's got cool biometrics. It's got a cool digital electronic thing that I can open really fast. Well,
what about laws holding people responsible for not
they have
safely storing, safely operating?
They have them.
Well, I don't know. Really.
They do. Look, they're on the books.
Especially here in Michigan. A lot of people just keep their guns under their beds, and I think that's perfectly legal.
It is legal.
There are a lot of issues that need to definitely, be thought through.
Yep. But I cover most of them. I cover most of them. A lot of these are questions that I did answer in my book.
Well, we're running out of time.
Are we already?
I'm afraid so. So,
Let's talk about the other book, though.
what other book?
The Michigan Atheists Speak Out book.
Oh,
I think that's why I got pinched.
do we have a
because,
copy?
You know, we don't. It's not out yet, but it's coming
Okay.
out. And I think the reason I got pinched was because I described our Godless Gunnies. It's an atheist shooting group that came out of Dam when I was talking about my adventures, and we went to the Afterglow, and I was talking about it, and one of the members, Amy Ingram, the mother of the Godless Gunnies, by the way, thank you, Amy, shout out. She said, why don't we have a range day just for us? And I said, well, was there any interest? And about a dozen hands went up. And that was the birth of the Godless Gunnies. And we've been having monthly excursions ever since. So you can look us up on Facebook, Godless Gunnies Detroit.
Okay.
There's a Facebook
Sounds
page
like
for
fun.
Knowing Guns. And we do have some nice debates in the Knowing Guns forum, too. If you read something, if you find an error.
Or a sport.
That's right. If you find an error or something in there, or something that maybe you think should be in there, yes, I will be presenting a volume 2 eventually.
Oh, you're going to have a
second
volume
edition.
2?
There might be a volume 2 or at least a second edition. I don't know. It depends on how
At
much
least a new
stuff I get.
copyright, eh?
Exactly.
Update it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because things have changed
Right. Very
over
good.
time.
Okay. Do you have a website?
I do. I have several. The
Knowing Guns
Facebook
by
page is
Stu
a kind of a
Chisholm.
working group where we can discuss the concepts, or you can add some new stuff. I also expand on the footnotes too. You know, because I only had so much room,
Okay.
so I
All
like
right.
to like
Well,
to give references and sources.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well,
Good
thank
luck.
you so much.
Good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Pleasure.